Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this afternoon's session where we're looking at one of our credit control topics, which is bad debt. So part 3 in the credit control series of webinars that we've been doing. If you haven't had a chance to attend the other sessions or watch the recordings, just look out for your follow-up email, which you'll receive around about an hour after we finish today. And it will include links so you can go and view the recordings of the other sessions that we have run. So today's session, quite a short session, this one, not a lot to cover for bad debt, but we're going to show you the ins and outs of how to essentially write it off and then how to recover the VAT. So I'm joined today by Tina and Jackie, who will be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. And just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you've attended our webinars before, you will be familiar with this. You don't need a microphone. If you've got a microphone, it will be muted automatically. You'll find you can't unmute yourself, so you can't speak to us during the session, but you will be able to submit your questions via the questions panel, which you should see in the bottom right-hand corner. If you can't currently see that, just on your toolbar, click that little icon, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark, and that will expand the panel and you can start typing any comments or questions you have. So keep Tina and Jackie busy. As I say, they'll be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. We'll either provide an answer, maybe send you a link to one of our Help Centre articles, which will cover the detailed steps, or maybe if it's a bit more in depth, they'll point you the direction of getting in touch with our support team. Now, there is also an option to download a copy of the slides that we're doing today. So if you use the download a handout link that we got highlighted there, then you will be able to download a handout. There's two, both PDFs. One will have all the color on in the background and the links will work, etc. The other one is in a printable format, so all the colors stripped out of the slides, etc. Just make it a little bit quicker to print. So those are available throughout. The link to download the handout will also be available on the follow-up email, which you receive round about an hour after we finish. Let's have a quick look at what we're covering in this afternoon's session. So as I mentioned, quite a short session, this one. So a little bit of background to bad debt. We'll be looking at how you go about setting up your nominal ledger so that you can process bad debt. And then we're going to look at writing off invoices, and we're going to look at both methods, the manual method and the wizard option. And then something that you might not realise is that you need to then post a journal at some point to recover the VAT, but not in all instances. I'll explain more about that when it comes to writing them off. Just at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support that's available. And if there are any outstanding questions, we'll hang around to answer as many as we can. But as I say, it should be quite a short session to whiz through the content today. So a little bit of an introduction to bad debt, and this is just an extract from the HMRC notice, which you'll be able to access online via HMRC's website if you need it. But I've pulled out 3 key points that we're almost going to touch on today. So for bad debt and writing it off, so you must have already accounted for the VAT on the supplies and paid it across to HMRC. Now that means what we're covering today wouldn't necessarily be applicable to all VAT schemes. I'll explain more about that as we go through it. You must have written off the debt in your day-to-day VAT accounts and transferred it to a separate bad debt account, which is what we're going to be looking at when we write off the transactions. And also the debt must have remained unpaid for a period of 6 months, and that's quite important as well. So there's a sort of a time scale on when you can recover the VAT element on that bad debt. But again, you'll find all that information on the HMRC's notice that we've got listed there. Now, before you start writing off bad debt, you'll need to check your nominal ledger. Now, there's not a lot for you to check here. You just need to make sure that you've got a bad debts nominal code set up, which you will do by default. And by default, it will be 8100. So check your nominal code list. And just make sure you've got that nominal code listed. You also need to check that it's in settings and set up as the relevant control account, which I'll just quickly show you that one, just so you can see what we're talking about. So we just want to go into settings at the top there on the menu, and then come down to control accounts. Just click yes to close the other windows. And we've got a setting here for bad debt. So when we're writing off transactions, specifically when we're looking at the wizard where we're going to be writing off transactions, it will pick this nominal code up by default. Obviously, if you've created your own nominal ledger accounts, you want to make sure that's set accordingly. So just OK that. And that's all you need to do to essentially prepare to start writing off bad debt. So nice and simple, that one. Right, we'll pop back to the slides and we're going to start by looking at the manual method of writing off invoices. Now it's as simple as going into customers and entering a batch credit. Now you could do it where you go via invoicing and do a credit as well. Obviously a bad debt, it's not really a document that you need to print out or send to your customer. You're just going to be writing it off. So batch credit is normally the recommended way to do that. What you'll essentially be doing is writing off the value of the invoice, or invoices if there's more than one. Now this method would be applicable no matter what VAT scheme you're on. So it doesn't matter whether you're on the standard scheme, the flat rate invoice-based scheme, or the cash accounting schemes. The only thing you need to remember at the end of that is you will need to allocate the transactions. So nice and easy. And I'll show you how you go about doing that as well. So let's run through a bit of an example. If we go back to my screen, we're going to pop into customers. And I've got a few customers on my list here with outstanding balances. So I'm going to pick on this one today, this County Golf Supplies. Go and have a look at the activity of that one. And we can see there's transaction number 21. It's a sales invoice and it's dated 1st of June of this year. Reference 162, which will be the invoice number that I've entered, and it's for £120 in total. Now, if I look down to the bottom, I can see in this lower sort of box, I've got the detail. Now, if you aren't seeing that as well, you've got this sort of toggle option at the top here on your toolbar. So it might be that you've just got the one list. If you want to see the detail, just again, click show detail, and when you highlight the transaction, you'll get a breakdown in this bottom box. Now, this doesn't actually show me on this box the breakdown, although it's saying the amount is 120 and it's tax code T1. It doesn't necessarily show me the net and the tax breakdown. But at this stage, I don't actually need that information as such because I'm going to be writing off this transaction just with the T9 tax code. So I need to write it off with the non-VATable tax code. Now that will differ if you are on cash accounting or the flat rate cash based, in which case you will need to know that information because you will write off the invoice by entering a credit note with the original net and VAT breakdown. Just a straight write-off in that case. I'm on the standard scheme, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to close out of that. And if you did need that information, so if you're armed with the transaction number 21, that would be the thing to go for. So armed with that, you can go into transactions and you could look for that transaction, find it on your list, and just obviously scroll along and you will find the net and the tax breakdown. So as I mentioned, if you're on the standard scheme or the flat rate invoice-based scheme, you will write off that invoice, if it's the full value, with a T9 tax code. So your non-VATable tax code. If you're on cash accounting, a little bit different, you write it off with the original tax code, with the original net VAT breakdown. Now to write that off, all we're going to do is go into customers, we'll choose batch credit, choose your customer. So in this case, we're going to choose that County Golf Supplies. Pop in your date. I'll just use today's date. I'll pop in a credit number. Now, I'm not issuing a credit as such, so I'm just going to call it bad debt. You might put something also in the extra reference. Now, the nominal code, this is where we need to specify the bad debt write-off nominal code. So in this case, I'm going to enter 8100 or whatever nominal code you're using if you're not using the standard nominal code list. I'm going to ignore the department, and also I'll ignore project reference as well. We're just going to put bad debt in the details. And I'm going to enter the full value, so £120 in this instance, and change that to a T9 tax code. Now, if I was on cash accounting, that's where it would differ. I would enter the net value, use the original tax code, and it would then calculate the original VAT. That would be the difference. All I want to do at that point is click Save. Now at this stage, if we just go and have a look at this County Golf Supplies and have a look at the activity, and what we can see is we've just really simple account this one because it's only the two transactions. We've got the original invoice and then we've got the original credit note. But you can see in the O/S column, the outstanding column, that both transactions are fully outstanding. So what we want to do next is just match them together. Now to do that, nice and simple, we're just going to, within the customer screen, we can go into customer receipt, or we could go into bank accounts, customer receipt, takes you into the same option. Choose a bank account. It doesn't really matter which one at this stage because we're not actually going to be showing anything being received. We're just going into this area to match the transactions together, or to what we term allocate them. So choose your bank account, choose your customer, so County Golf Supplies. And as you'll see, it brings through the two transactions. Now you do have a wizard option. So in the wizard option, you've got an option, allocate all credit notes to invoices. That will just sort of guide you through that process essentially, but I'm just going to do it manually. I don't need to, well, I can enter a date. I'll just, normally with this is you would enter the most recent date of the transactions that you're allocating. So in this case, 21st of December, where I've just used today's date. It doesn't matter about a reference, an extra reference, or you should leave the amount set to 0. And all I want to do is within the receipt column, just click into it, and then I'm going to click pay in full and then pay in full. So I could type that value in, but I'm just going to type pay in full, click pay in full and then pay in full. So it puts £120 against each of the two transactions. And you can see the amount at the top is still 0, and the analysis total at the bottom is also 0. So we know we've essentially sort of filled in the screen correctly at that point. All I'm going to do is I'm going to click save at that point, and that's it done. Now, if I had used the wrong date, so maybe I'd used the earlier date of the two, it would have generated me a warning there when I try to save it, saying, are you sure you want to do this? You should always use the later date of whichever transactions you're allocating together. Right, we'll just close out of that one. And at this stage, you can see it's got a 0 balance on the account. If you just have a quick look at the activity, you can see both transactions still listed, and you can see in the outstanding column, it's blank against each of them. And also at the bottom, if you highlight the invoice at the top, and in the detail box at the bottom, you can see it's got the detail of the original invoice, and you can see beneath it any allocations. Again, just to remind you, just in case you missed that when I mentioned about having the two boxes, you've got these toggle options at the top. So if you don't want to see the second box, you can just hide the detail or show detail. And obviously, if I highlight the credit note at the top, it shows the same information, but essentially in reverse. So that's one way of writing off, just doing it manually, nice and easy. The steps are included, obviously, within our help center as well. Right, let's pop back to the slides. Now, the second option that I'm going to show you for writing off that bad debt is actually using the wizard. So this wizard is something that's been around for a long time. It's been in the software since, well, I think since day one. However, it wasn't always available in all levels of the software, but it has been for a considerable amount of time. So if you were in Essentials, for instance, you wouldn't have had this option back in the early 2000s, but you've obviously got that now in your software. So we're going to look at this wizard option. Again, just keeps it nice and easy for you. There are some advantages, which we'll see as we work through that. Now, VAT scheme-wise, you can use the wizard if you're on the standard or the flat rate invoice-based VAT scheme. But you should not use this if you're on the cash accounting or the flat rate cash-based, as when it posts the credit note to write off the bad debt, it will post that with your non-VAT-able tax code. And as we mentioned when we were doing it manually, if you are on one of those cash-based schemes, you need to write that off with the original tax code. So if you were using cash accounting and you access this option, you're going to get that warning appear, and that's just going to cause you problems. Right, let's get back to my screen. We'll run through a demo of using the wizard. You'll see the difference this time round as well. Now this time I've got a second account, Compton Packaging. If we just have a look at that one, and you'll see it's pretty much as similar to what we're looking at on the previous account. I've kept it nice and simple. I've got an invoice that's dated, in this case, the 9th of June. It's still outstanding, still fully outstanding in this case. And I just want to write that off. Now to write that off, we're going to use the wizard. So back to the customers list. The wizard you access via this write-offs option at the top. If you can't see that option, bearing in mind that all sort of variants of the software, so it doesn't matter whether you're on Essentials, Standard or Professional, it will have this option available to you. If you can't see it at the top, it's going to be for one of two reasons. One is that your username doesn't have access to this write-offs option. The other is that you've just hidden it at some point. And I always like to mention this when we're talking about options along the top, because it's one of those that not a lot of people are aware of, is that if you right click anywhere on your toolbar at the top, it will give you a list of the options. Now it could be at some point that the write-offs option maybe you've just accidentally hidden. Maybe there are options that you don't use. So when you just think, well, it's always there. Things like labels. Do you print labels? If I right click, I can look for it on the list and I can think, well, I'll just hide that option. Maybe letters you don't use, I'll hide that option. That starts decluttering your toolbar at the top. If you don't integrate with Go Cardless for the direct debit options, you'll see there's options in here as well. So again, you might switch some of these options off. Right, what we're going to do though, I'm just going to switch it back on. I'm thinking it disappeared there. So I'll just switch it back on. Obviously, you can switch the options on and off at any point as well. So we're going to access the write-offs option. It launches this little wizard. So 4 easy steps. First of all, we need to choose what is it you want to do. So there's a number of options on here. And again, you would find loads of information about these options if needed within the Help Center. But we want to write off either, or we can choose, there's a number of write-off options. So you're probably, in this case, going to either choose to write off the customer account, if it's the full balance. Now, there is only the one transaction in my case. Or we can write off customer transactions if we need to choose a specific transaction. Maybe there's more than one. So we'll go down that route. So we'll write off customer transactions. Choose the customer from the list. So the one we're after is that Compton Packaging. We then click Next to go on to step 2. Now it will then give you a list of the transactions that potentially could be written off. So we select it. So we'll just select that one invoice. Click Next. Pop in your date that you want to use for the write-off and also an additional reference if you want to enter one. I'll just leave that blank for the time being. Click Next. Gives me a summary of what's about to happen. Click Post, and that's it done. So down to 0 balance. Now what it has done, if we go into the activity, is it has posted the credit note automatically. Now the beauty of using this option, it's a little bit quicker because you'll see in the outstanding column, there's nothing outstanding. It automatically allocates that bad debt credit note, as it were. It automatically allocates that to the transactions that we'd selected in the wizard. So it's a little bit quicker and a little bit slicker doing it, that option, as long as you're on the appropriate VAT scheme, of course. So nice and easy using that option. So just to confirm, it was at the top, it's the write-offs option that you're after. And then you've got the various write-off options, and the one we chose at that point was the write-off customer transactions. Then just a case of following that through to essentially post that credit note and automatically allocate it to the relevant invoices. So both options, whether you're doing it manually or you're doing it via the wizard, nice and simple. Right, let's pop back to the slides. If you've got any questions, pop them in there. As I say, we've got Tina and Jackie on hand to answer any questions that you might have. But I'm just going to pop back to the slides for a moment, and I want to quickly discuss the VAT side of things. Now, again, in the HMRC notice, it will state when you need to reclaim the VAT, it states to claim a refund, you should include the amount of the VAT you're claiming in box 4 of your VAT return. Now, it always seems a little bit odd, this one, because you're writing off essentially sales bad debt. So you would probably initially think that you would want that to adjust the VAT in box 1. But actually, what you're doing is you're increasing the figure in box 4. So that's the way it's recommended by HMRC. And to do that, to get this adjustment to recover the VAT, you need to go into nominal codes and then post a simple journal entry. So we're going to post this journal. Now, what I mentioned earlier in relation to VAT schemes, you do not need to post this journal if you are on one of the cash accounting schemes, because you would never have had to pay that VAT across, because it's bad debt, the invoice would have been outstanding, and because essentially you declare the VAT when an invoice is paid, that transaction would never have been included on a VAT return. So you don't need to post this element if you're on one of the cash accounting schemes. If you're on the standard-based scheme or the flat rate invoice-based, then yes, you would post it in this way. So simple journal. So 2 lines on the journal. Let's switch back to my screen. We'll show you how to post that. All right, let's just cancel out of that wizard. So we're going to go into nominal codes and then choose journal entry at the top. Pop in a reference. I'm just going to say bad debt. Pop in your date. You just need to make sure that is dated so it gets picked up in the relevant VAT period. So if your next VAT return, let's say it covers October, November, December, then as long as that transaction is dated in or prior to that VAT period, when you run your VAT return, it would pick it up and adjust your figures accordingly. So simple 2-line journal, we'll just tab down to the nominal code. We'll do 8100, so the bad debt write-off nominal code. Now you can pop in an extra reference and department if you want to. I'm just going to tab into the details. In the details, I'll use bad debt reclaim VAT. Now that, just in case you're wondering about that as well, that's what's popped up there. Obviously, if you aren't familiar with it, it's just pulling through the previous sort of details that I've typed into that field. So just saves me typing it in again. Now this line of your journal should be a T9 tax code. You don't want this line of the journal being picked up. So your debit stays as 0 and the VAT element. Now in this case, I'm going to do £40. And the reason for that is that the 2 transactions that we were writing off, £100 net for both of them, £20 each for both of them as well. So I'll just do the 2 on the one journal. The next line is to the purchase tax control account. So 2201 if you're using the standard list of nominal codes. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to press F6 on my keyboard to copy whatever's in the box above. It'll copy it down. Obviously mentions that at the top as well. So I could have just clicked the button, but F6, it will do it for you. And then all I want to do is the same value. This time I'm going to enter into the debit column. So again, £40. And then at that point, I'm ready to save it. And then essentially that's it done. The next time I run a VAT return at that point, so if we just go into the VAT return, and we'll just do October of this year through to December, just calculate that. So ignore those transactions for the time being. And you'll see it pulls through some transactions. Just go back a second. Excuse me. Let me just double check, make sure I've done that right. Did I forget to change the nominal code? Sorry, the tax code there. Probably did. Let me just double check that. I did. So even as you can see, it's easy to do to make an error on a journal. I thought that wasn't right. Just seeing anyone's paying attention. Nobody submitted a comment there. So I'm just going to edit my journal. I thought that didn't look right. I forgot to change it. So that second line of the journal, I want that line to be picked up on the VAT return. Again, it will outline this in the Help Center article if you've downloaded that. Just going to save it. So we'll now have at the bottom of a scroll down, it will have a corrected journal. And if I now go back to the VAT return, nearly caught me out there. And again, I'll just do October through to December, calculate the VAT return. I'll just ignore those for the time being. And you can see this time, panic over, I can see it's pulled through that £40 that I've popped in there. Now, if I drill down on that value as well, we'll see in the journal debits column at T1, I've got the £40. If I want to see the breakdown of that value, just double click it. And I can see it was transaction number 28, which is that journal that we've just posted. So that's how it would recover the VAT for you. So you're posting that journal. Any questions on that at all? If you do think of anything, pop it into the questions panel and we'll try and pick that up for you. Now, I just want to go back to the slides for a moment and just to quickly mention some of the information that's available on the Help Center. If you've downloaded the standard handout for today's session, these links will work for you. So I've got a link to our Help Center, and there's loads of articles on writing off the sort of customer invoices to bad debts, writing off a customer's account, recovering the VAT on the bad debt write-off, how to use the wizard that we mentioned, and also there's an article there on setting up and managing a provision for bad debt as well. There's also the link to the relief from VAT on bad debts, that VAT notice that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So if you have downloaded the standard handout, not the printer-friendly one, then the links will actually work on the downloads. But this information is obviously really easy to find anywhere within the Help Center. If you don't get a chance to download that or you're not sure what to do, you just need to click the little icon on your toolbar down the right, the little handout icon. Looks like a little bit of paper with a corner folded over. Then you'll just be able to select what it is you're after, click download. It should download it for you. If you don't get a chance to do that, then watch out for your follow-up email. It will include the links that you need so you can access the Sage City post afterwards. So you get that email in about an hour's time, and it will include the links that you need. So there'll be copies of the common questions and answers from today's and the previous sessions that we've run. We don't tend to not get many questions on these sessions. It's quite a straightforward topic. But you will be able to view those as well, plus also download the handout and, of course, watch a recording of today's session. Just to quickly mention some of the webinars we've got planned in. We've got one more this year, which is tomorrow, for which we'll be covering running the year end within Sage 50 accounts. So we'll explain and demonstrate what the year end process looks like from start to finish, including preparation, running the year end, so running that wizard, and also covering some of the optional post-year end tasks. So little bit of information about things like clearing audit trail, deleting records, that type of thing. If you've got any requests for topics you'd like to see covered going forward, little survey pops up as you leave today, pop them on there. And you'll see some of the other sessions we've got planned in going forward for January as well. Version 29, not a definite release date of that yet, other than it will be very early next year. If you want to come along and see what's going to be included and what the changes are, then please get yourself signed up. But there's loads of other sessions that you can sign up for. And as usual, they're all free to attend. Right. Okay, brings us to the end of the session. We've got one outstanding question. So we'll pick that up, or possibly Jackie or Tina will pick that up. But let me just thank you for your time, for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed the session and maybe found it useful. So B, your question there, Jackie, looks like Jackie's picking that one up for you. So hopefully coming along to the session, it's made you realise you've maybe missed that step out. So again, you'll be able to now recover the VAT. But thanks for coming along. I hope you have enjoyed it. Remember, email comes out around about an hour's time. So it'll include links to Seed City, so you can access recordings, view the Q&A, and also download the handouts. And of course, there are links where you can view other recordings as well. So if you've missed any sessions, or maybe you miss sessions in the future, keep the links handy. You can always get back to those at any time. The short survey should pop up as you leave the session today. If you've got any thoughts, ideas, anything you'd like to share with us at all, then please, if you can take a minute just to complete that survey, it would be greatly appreciated. We love reading those comments to see if we're hitting the mark or not. It's always interesting to see what ideas people have as to how we could improve the webinars as well. So anything like that, please pop it on there. Okay, so we only had the one outstanding question. If you do think of anything after you leave the session today, remember you've got full access to the help center. There's loads of information in there. And beyond that, if you need some extra help, then do get in touch with our support team. But otherwise, take care, stay safe, and have a great Christmas and New Year. And hopefully we'll see you, if not tomorrow, we'll see you in 2023. Many thanks.